Hey, what's going on, guys? Alex here with TFL Off-Road. I'm here in Texas with the all-new 2024 Kawasaki Mule Pro 1000 lineup. A lot of changes to this vehicle for this year. We're going to go through all of them in this video. Both the FX, the single-row Mule, as well as the FXT, which we have a lot of experience with. The FXT is the one we had as a long-term loaner up at Tumbleweed Ranch, as well as the FXR. A lot of changes for all these. We're going to go through them all in this video. Let's get it out on the trail and see what these are all about. All right, so a little later in the video, we'll hop in one of these FXTs. We already have a lot of experience in the older FXT from when we had it at the ranch, but I'm really curious about this FXR because I don't have any seat time in one of these. And this is the recreation model, shorter wheelbase. You lose the back row, you don't have the trans cab system, but you do have slightly bigger tire, 27-inch tires on the FXR compared to the 26-inch tires on the FXT. There's Steven too. Say hi to the old TFL off-road guy. There's the first startup with this new engine, and sounds and feels pretty similar to the old one, just sitting here idling. It's got that same kind of idle sound, but go low range to start off and see what this is all about. We're out here about 2 hours outside of Dallas in Texas in the middle of July, and I think the high today is like 104 degrees with the humidity. I think it's gonna feel like 110. So this is going to be a true torture test of these vehicles today. I'm pretty excited about this new Mule because when we had ours at Tumbleweed Ranch for a number of months, it was just killer and unstoppable. It was the perfect filming vehicle, the perfect recovery vehicle. I can't tell you how many Jeeps and Toyotas and other off-roaders a Mule just like this pulled out of our muddy off-road course. So I was already pretty impressed with the Mule before I even got into this new one. And yeah, they've made it more fun to own with a faster engine, a lot more power. And they've also made it easier to own with a lot of the maintenance items and comfort items, the things you need to live with on a day-to-day basis if you're an owner of one of these. On paper, some pretty good changes, and out here on the trail, I can already feel the difference. I mean, vehicle feels pretty similar to drive to the one we had as a long-term loaner, the outgoing model, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. That was one of my favorite side-by-sides we've ever tested, so I'm glad they didn't change too much. But the things they did change, I'm noticing right away, and I can definitely tell that there's a little more ground clearance and a little more suspension travel on this model. This trail's starting to get a little rough, a little rutted out, and I have a lot of seat time in the outgoing model on our trail back at Tumbleweed Ranch, and I definitely scraped the bottom of that a little more than I'm doing with this one. I think some of these big ruts and divots here and some of these roots sticking out, the old one might have scraped some skid plates, and this one seems to just work through no problem. You get this on a super hard trail, yeah, you're still gonna scrape some things and maybe run out of travel at some points if you're doing really hard crawling, but for this kind of stuff, it's pretty perfect. And keep in mind, this is still a utility side-by-side, and we're really gonna put that to the test here over these bigger rocks. I'm gonna go into four-wheel drive. First time I'm doing that all day. And we're taking a hard line through this. And look at that. We're like right above that rock there. So we touched a little bit of the underside at the front of that obstacle, but very minor. So ground clearance, suspension travel, all good stuff. Being in this FXR model, this recreation model with the short wheelbase, I think that really helped us out on that last obstacle compared to the FXT over here, which has a much longer wheelbase. So that did really well. Pretty impressed with that. I also really like that Kawasaki gives you hard switches on the dash for your lights, but also two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, as well as your diff lock on and off. and then you've got a little screen over here, nothing in front of the driver, but you've got a screen angled towards the driver that shows you the time, your speed, fuel, all those kinds of things. And then you have a little position over here that shows you whether you're in two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, and what's going on with your diff.
Now there's a lot of minor changes all over this vehicle, but by far the biggest change is this new engine right here. The outgoing Mule, the 2023 model, was powered by an 812cc engine. Much more displacement out of this model. It's a 999cc parallel twin engine, 4-stroke, liquid cooled, and it is making a lot more power than the old one. Kawasaki says a 49% horsepower increase compared to the old model, and they don't put out an official power number, but according to published reports, the old model made somewhere around 45 horsepower, and if you do the math, this should be in the high 60s. Also a 27% increase in torque and a 30% top speed increase as well. Just looking at the spec sheet of this vehicle, really impressive what they were able to do with this new engine. Kawasaki also did a pretty good job increasing suspension travel and ground clearance for this new model compared to the old one, which is really impressive to me because it looks so similar and the numbers are pretty different. So ground clearance went up from 10.2 inches to 11.6 inches. So you gained 1.4 inches of ground clearance compared to the old one. And then suspension travel in the front, you're up from 8.7 inches to 11 inches, which is a 2.3 inch increase. Very impressive there. And then back at the rear, you went from 8.5 inches of travel up to 10.1 inches of travel. So ground clearance and suspension travel all the way around at all four corners has been improved. They were able to do that by modifying the location of some of the shock mounts. And as far as the chassis goes, it's a really similar chassis to the outgoing model, which is no surprise. It was already a really good chassis, and this vehicle looks pretty similar. The only thing that's really different is the engine mounting locations to accommodate the new engine in this vehicle, and again, like I said, the new shock mount locations.
Oh yeah. That is a good bit faster than the outgoing model, which I had a tendency to drive around full throttle going down to our off-road courses. This is way faster. This really feels a lot closer to a sport or recreation side-by-side than it used to. I mean, it's definitely not as fast as, you know, a full-on sport side-by-side, but definitely you can feel the power difference compared to the old one. Let's punch it. We'll keep an eye on the speed here. Got a little loose there. I had to jump on the brakes, but we got up to it looked like around 55 miles an hour. It took a little bit of time to get there, but yeah, I wouldn't want to go too much faster than that in this utility side-by-side anyway. You need bigger tires, better suspension, more solid vehicle to really feel comfortable going above 60 miles an hour. So speed-wise, seems good. We've got some Longhorns over there. Bed capacity on this is about 1,000 pounds. It'll tow 2,000 pounds, so not quite gonna load one of those guys up in the bed, but I suppose you could put them on a trailer and tow them around.
One of the coolest new features of this new Mule is the self-leveling rear suspension, and it's not available on all models. That's the standard looking shock I just showed you. But over here we have the Ranch Edition, similar to the one we had at our TFL Tumbleweed Ranch for a while. This is the Platinum Ranch Edition. And if we look at the rear shocks, you can see they look a little different. They've got kind of a sleeve on the inside of there that's covering up some valving, and basically this is not an electronically controlled system, but it's an oil controlled system. So it needs to be driven to actually self-level. The oil needs to kind of work through those valves and the lines. But if you load this bed up and then start driving this around, it will self-level the rear suspension. There's no settings for it or anything, no switches on the dash, it just kind of works in the background. But that is a really cool feature, and especially if you're using this on a ranch for work. We used ours to move gravel around to work on our off-road course. That would be a really nice feature and just makes the vehicle more controllable, more predictable, and you should kind of forget you have a load back there when you're driving around with the self-leveling rear suspension. Kawasaki also changed up the camo graphic they're doing on the FXT for this year. They just changed the brand they went with, so it's now provided by True Timber. It's their Strata design, and these are just decals stickered to the side, but these are actually hydro dipped. And if you're interested in seeing that process, I did a factory tour of the Kawasaki plant where these are built in Lincoln, Nebraska. All the mules are built in the USA, and you can see the process of them applying this camo graphic in that video. So I'll link that in the description below. It's really cool. I definitely recommend checking that out.
There's a little bit of a ride in the FXR. I was really excited to get some seat time in this because I've never been in one of these before, but now we're gonna switch over to the FXT, which is the 6-seat model with the transformable bed situation, so you can slide this all forward, make a bigger bed, can seat 3 passengers or 6 passengers. And this is the one I'm really excited to get behind the wheel of because I'll really be able to tell the difference with the new engines. Since I've driven this wheelbase before, I've spent a lot of time in this configuration, so now it's all going to be about the engine. I think Kawasaki did a good job with this motor, putting it into the Mule. Like I said, there's faster engines out there, but for this platform, I think anything more than this would be a little bit overkill. With this extra added speed, you do notice the limitations of the suspension on the Mule sometimes, especially when you're going pretty fast and you get on the brakes hard. It does kind of wiggle itself around a little bit. It doesn't feel super stable. So, if you were racing this around all the time, you maybe would want to put some better suspension on it. But really, if you're racing this around all the time, just get a sportier side-by-side is the answer. So this has good power to have some fun and pick up some speed when the trail really opens up, but I don't think it's too much for this kind of machine. And really, with this Mule, you're not going to be driving it flat out all the time, so I don't mind that the suspension is a little wallowy when you're really pushing it. This is still powered by the same CVT it used to be powered by, and I'm usually not a huge fan of CVTs in cars, at least. In side-by-sides, I do think they make sense. I am also a pretty big fan of Honda's dual clutch system in their side-by-sides, but I haven't had any issues with this CVT, and we beat it up pretty good when we had it at Tumbleweed Ranch. I'm in high right now because we were just going pretty fast, but I actually should switch into low gear. Kawasaki says anything, from a stop to about 25 miles an hour, you should probably be in low. And then really you're only using high for your fast speed running. So low's where I'm going to be most of the time out on this trail. One thing I don't love about the Mule is this straight up and down shifter, which you kind of have to fight with sometimes to get it where you want it. I much prefer a gated shifter, but what are you gonna do? I'm also not a huge fan of the manual parking brake in the Mule. Yes, I love manual parking brakes in cars, but we used our Mule as a filming vehicle. We had like 10-15 different people driving it at any given time, just kind of rotating in and out of the vehicle, and it's much better to take it out of park and put it into drive. Just seems more like an automatic car. I can't tell you how many times at the ranch when we had one of these, someone would drive away with the parking brake on. We ended up kind of roasting it a little bit. So yeah, I wish they'd go to a gated shifter with a park gear and lose the parking brake, but apparently a lot of customers really like this manual parking brake. I'm just not one of them. Steering, just like the old model, feels pretty good. Electronic power steering, and you also have a tilt steering wheel, so you can really adjust it where you want it and make yourself comfortable. These being bench seats, you're locked into this position. The back doesn't recline at all. They don't slide forward or backward, but plenty of legroom in this vehicle, and I think really anyone would be able to get comfortable in this. Now, even though the R stands for recreation in the FXR, I think with this new engine, if you're really going to be doing some sporty trails, I think the FXT is the one to get, the longer wheelbase version. It just seems a little more stable, doesn't get quite as unhappy if you stab the brakes or jab the gas really aggressively. Just feels a little more planted, a little less squirrely out on the trail. With that being said, though, it depends what kind of terrain you're doing. Like I said, if you kind of are riding around loose, dusty areas, sandy areas like this, longer wheelbase is better. But if I were in Colorado doing a lot of rock crawling, I probably would appreciate the shorter wheelbase of the FXR, and I wouldn't be going that fast, so it wouldn't matter that much. So some other changes here for this new Mule. Styling's been changed very slightly, but looks pretty similar to the old one, so not much to talk about there. There are a couple of comfort items that have been improved. So cup holders have always been here, but we now have 2 more on the dash. You've got some cup holders back here for the passengers, so that's all nice. There's also a new radiator guard behind here, which helps drive some heat away from the people in the passenger compartment, so you should stay a little cooler. A little hard to tell in this hot Texas sun if that's actually doing anything, but I'll take their word for it. Also, under this cover here, you can see we've got a terminal block installed, so if you want to run lights or a winch or any kind of accessories, it's easy to tap into. This has always been an accessory you could get from Kawasaki. Now it's offered standard, which is really nice. And they also made it easier to get to some of the maintenance items on this machine, so let's do that real quick. Flip that up. I love how easy these mules are to transform the bed. I've tested a lot of these systems, and this Kawasaki one seems to be one of the easiest to use. So the whole thing dumps. It's a assisted dump bed with a strut right there. Takes like 2 seconds to do, and then you have super easy access to everything in here, including the top side of your engine. Oil filter is right there. They've changed the location of that. It's now downward facing and has a little catch pan underneath it. Air filter has also been revised a good bit. They raised up the intake point, so it's now a little better shielded from dust, and it now intakes into here, into the air box. So it used to be a lot lower down. It's now better protected. Your air cleaner or air box should stay a lot cleaner now, and it's easier to access, just kind of tucked behind this cover right here. Dipstick is also a lot easier to get to now for a lot of people that run these in fleets need to access that all the time. So yeah, they just made it a little easier to get to everything. All right, I want to show you this trans-cab system and show you how easy it is to convert from a 6-passenger vehicle to a 3-passenger with the bigger bed, because I really do think this is one of the best systems, probably the best system in the side-by-side industry. Nothing is this easy to use. So you just undo those 2 latches, pull the seat out of the way. We're going to push this bar up here, push the bar up on the other side, slide the whole thing forward, just like this. Boom. Bar comes back down. And then if you open the door again, we have a latch. Latch that in. Boom. Other side. It's that easy. We are now with a bigger bed. We can now put 1,000 pounds back here. In the shorter configuration, you can only do about 350 pounds. And that is so cool that you can do that in just about a minute. I don't know, I have a timer up on the screen. I don't even know how long that took, but that is so easy, and you never will need to pull out an instruction manual to make that work. And I can't say the same about some of the competition. All right, we've got a little bit of a hill climb here. I'm gonna go 2-wheel drive, diff unlocked. We'll go low gear though. and see if we can make it up in two-wheel drive. No problem. Decently good tires on this mule. Just cruising around, this feels just like the old mule until you punch it. And then you notice that you've got a lot more power. I'm not just saying that because the numbers say so. This really does feel like a much sportier engine than the old mule. All right, and this is the pro-fxt model, the HD edition that I keep talking about. So obviously we just have the single bench seat here. You don't have the trans cab system, but really big bed and still a decently short wheelbase to move you around. But one thing really cool with the HD edition, besides the self-leveling rear suspension back there, is it has a hydraulic dumping bed. So whereas all the other mule models have a strut assisted dump bed, this one's actually powered. So you undo those two little latches there, that holds it down, and then we have a rocker switch right here. You just push up, the whole thing will start to lift up. You can see the big piston right here that's powering it, and you can still have 1,000 pounds in this bed and still use the dump feature. You've got this FX, which is really made to work. You've got the single row of seating. You've got the FXT, which has the same wheelbase as this, but an extra row behind this, so you can hold up to 6 people, and a convertible bed system. And then you've got the FXR, which is the recreational one, shorter wheelbase, shorter bed, made for going to have fun, but can still do a little bit of work. I also think a side-by-side like this is kind of the ideal side-by-side for most people to get. I see so many people out in Colorado with, you know, giant turbocharged side-by-sides that are crazy long and just way too powerful for the kind of terrain we have out in Colorado. Most of our riding is rock crawling, so you want a more maneuverable, shorter wheelbase, narrower vehicle, and you don't need 200 horsepower. It's just so versatile. I mean, especially if you own property. You can use this at your property, load it up with stuff, tow trailers around. It's really a work tool that you can then load your whole family into and take on the trail on the weekend, all in one vehicle. Whereas those crazy sport side-by-sides, yes, they're super fun, but you can only really use them for one thing. And unless you live in the middle of the desert where you have wide open dunes to run through, I think they're a little overkill. And most people would save some money and have a lot more fun out on the trail in something like this. And then you can still use it for work and do all kinds of things with it back at home. Well, overall, I think Kawasaki did a great job updating this new mule for 2024. The engine's great. I didn't think the mule was underpowered before, but how could I complain about being able to go faster and have some more fun when the trail opens up? Also, as you can see, more ground clearance, more suspension travel. You're gonna get hung up less on the trail. And like I've been talking about throughout this video, they made a number of other changes in a bunch of different areas to make this a little bit of a more appealing vehicle. If you already own a mule, I'm not sure it's really worth the upgrade. Maybe if you own a really old one, unless you do a lot of high speed running. If you really like taking advantage of the sporty capabilities of your side-by-side, you probably would benefit from this new engine. But the rest of the small changes, they're nice to live with if you're buying one of these for the first time. But if you already own one, I wouldn't upgrade just because you get more cup holders and a terminal block and easier to access oil filter and all those kinds of things.
All right, well, there you have it, the 2024 Kawasaki Mule Pro 1000 lineup. Really impressed with these units. From the outside, really doesn't look like all that much has changed. In fact, if you parked an old one next to one of these new ones, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference unless you really know what you're looking for. Overall, this engine feels a lot sportier and a lot more performance-oriented than the outgoing model. A lot more displacement, a lot more power. So I think Kawasaki did a good job there with the engine. And then and they made some small tweaks here and there, listened to their customers, and made things just better from an ownership standpoint. There's a new version of the FX for this year, which is the HD edition, which starts at $18,299, and basically that HD edition just gives you the hydraulic dumping cargo bed, so you can dump with the push of a switch instead of lifting it up, and it also has the self-leveling suspension that you get on some of the higher end Ranch Edition models. Besides there being 3 different configurations, the FX, FXT, and FXR, there's also a bunch of different trims. So this blue one happens to be an LE trim of the FXT. The FXT starts at $20,299. The FXR starts at $16,599, and then that FX HD edition, $18,299. And of course, you can option these with all kinds of packages, different features and add-ons from the dealership, but those are your base prices. Well, there you have it, everything you need to know about the new Mule lineup. I'm really hoping we can get our hands on one of these back in Colorado at the ranch. I'd really love to test out that FX HD edition, because the FX is the only version of the Mule I haven't been in yet, and that HD edition seems like it would just make perfect sense back home at our ranch. But there you have it. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and if you'll be upgrading from your old Mule to this new one. Check out alltfl.com so you don't miss anything. Catch you in the next video.